As we recall, World War II started in 1939, splitting the primary combatants into the Axis, including Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Allies, including Britain, the USSR, and the US. At the beginning, the US tried to stay neutral, but began freezing Axis assets. Then, on December 7, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and the next day, Roosevelt declared war.
A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Born in 1922, Hugh was the third of 4 sons. After his dad died at age 7, he went to an orphanage, growing up close to his second oldest brother, Laverne. At age 14, he was adopted by Walter and Helen Pauly. He lived with them for 5 years before joining the Army at age 19. Hugh died in 2002, but his stories live on through his 4 sons, including my dad, Dave Pauly, who has agreed to speak on his behalf. I started off by asking how Hugh got involved in war.
He was drafted. He asked to be part of the Army Air Force. He washed out because he could do everything except land. His visual stigmatism prevented him from keeping the wings horizontal. So then he went into cryptography. So as cryptography, he was a coder. He would code messages and send them out like Morse code. So he would have this machine that had different cards each time that would decode the information for him, and they changed every 4 weeks.
Hugh was a cryptographer in the Army until December of 1945. As a cryptographer, Hugh was never severely injured in war. But to get a better idea of who Hugh was, my dad tells a story of the one time that Hugh was wounded, the day he was complaining about kitchen duty.
He said, "I don't want to do this." And he said, "Okay, you sure you don't want to do it?" And his sergeant said, "Yeah." And Dad said, "Yeah, I don't want to do it." So he said, "Can I have your hand? And I want you to look over that wall." So he took my dad's hand, put it on the edge of the table, and went boom. He broke his 3 fingers.
Oh my goodness.
He said, "Now you're off duty."
One of his jobs involved him being in the island hopping campaign. This campaign was launched by the U.S. in 1942, with their mission being to take control of the Pacific Islands. He was very upset about the disparities between the government's reports of casualties versus the real damages of war.
He took unauthorized photos of a lot of the soldiers who were killed at the beaches.
Oh.
And he was always upset that they always, for a long time in World War II, the press releases by the Army downplayed the casualty ratings. And in one case, when we attacked and took Biak Island, he said that the reports that went out was like a casualty list of 7, but he had pictures of hundreds of soldiers who were killed at the waterfront.
Next, I asked if there were any other memorable stories that Hugh felt passionately about.
One of the biggest things that I remember, and probably the most emotional he ever got, was when he talked about the USS Indianapolis.
The USS Indianapolis was a heavy cruiser of the U.S. Navy during World War II. On July 26, 1945, it left the West Coast on a secret mission to Tinian. Its job was to deliver parts of the first atomic bomb, Bat Boy, that would later be dropped on Hiroshima. After successfully delivering the parts, the USS Indianapolis went to Guam, where it was then sent to join the USS Idaho in the Philippines for preparation. On July 30th, halfway to the Philippines, the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine, sinking the cruiser with over 1,000 men aboard. Now Hugh Pauly felt that he could have prevented this disaster, as my dad will explain.
Well, it turned out my dad got some information from I think it was a B-21 Catalina. It was a Catalina flying boat, and there was big boat type planes that would do reconnaissance. Well, saw this submarine tailing the Indianapolis.
Upon receiving the message, Hugh spent hours each day trying to decode it, but he couldn't figure it out, and he blames the Catalina pilot for it all.
Later, that every 4 weeks you're supposed to send a code. That was Army regulation.
Yeah.
Change the code. Well, this person who sent this back used a code that was about 30 days old. So he went through 4 weeks of code. Mm-hmm. But by that time, this submarine had put a torpedo into the Indianapolis, which blew up.
About 300 men had died when the cruiser sank, leaving about 900 men in the middle of the ocean without lifeboats, food, or water. The survivors weren't saved until 4 days later, after 600 more men had already died from starvation, sun exposure, dehydration, and sharks. If you've ever seen Jaws, Quint is a survivor of the USS Indianapolis and gives a speech about the sharks.
You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you, and those black eyes roll over white.
No one wanted to take the blame, and so they said, well, it was the fault of the skipper of the Indianapolis not taking evasive maneuvers. And so this guy got court-martialed. And now he fought it and finally gave up and he committed suicide.
Captain Charles McVeigh was the scapegoat for this disaster. It wasn't until 1968 that he committed suicide at age 70. Beforehand, McVeigh's sentence was remitted by Secretary Forrestal, and McVeigh served in the Navy until 1949. Continuing the discussion, I asked my dad how Hugh felt after the story was released.
That was probably the angriest he ever came. And I think if he would have at the time had a gun, he would have shot and killed that person in the Catalina. Because all they had to do was change the code. And he felt sad because he didn't know these guys, but these were guys his age.
The sinking of the USS Indianapolis was a traumatizing experience for the 316 survivors, and many suffered from PTSD, like many other soldiers returning from war. So I asked my dad how the war influenced Hugh.
So he was proud of what he did. He was impatient with others, and he was appreciative of each day of life. But he also and it also gives you a sense of, well, I've already faced death. You know, I'm not afraid to die. When I was actively, years ago, on the wards, gave me appreciation for what these guys did, what that generation went through. It gives you an idea of just how much we have to be thankful for what these guys did. And I think we lose that because America's been very fortunate.
The generation of World War II was also very patriotic compared to the generation today.
Quite a few people would lie about their age and say, I'm 18, or they would get their parents to sign a waiver saying, my boy has permission to join the service. So you have kids who were as young as 13, a lot of 14-year-olds, who said, I want to go fight. Nowadays you see the me generation, or, well, I want this, I'm entitled.
There's a definite difference between the generation of World War II and our generation. Thanks for watching and have a great summer.